So, Granite, we're known for, we've been around 22 years. I've been with the company for 22 years. So, since we started, I've actually worked for our CEO, Rob, since 1998. So, it's been 26 years working for him. But we started as a POTS line aggregator. And, like, to give everyone the background there, 22 years ago, POTS lines were used for voice and everything else. Now they're just alarms and faxes. But overall, um, what we didn't realize when we started was that there was a real need for multi-location businesses, really distributed enterprises of any kind, to have a better grasp on all their remote sites. And we didn't know it until we got a small piece of Walmart, small piece of Walgreens. That's what we got. It was the state of Rhode Island for Walmart, state of Mass for Walgreens. But within 2 months, we were out to Bentonville and to Chicago, and it was like, we want to do this nationwide. At the time, we only had the East Coast. We only had, back then it was Verizon and Bell South's footprint. It was before AT&T had bought everybody else. And we had a real big decision to make. So we've been debt-free since we started. We've never taken out any outside money. We've never had an outside investor. We've never acquired business. We've acquired IP. But as a company, we had a real big decision to make because we wanted to stay debt-free. But how could we support those companies? And we did. We structured a rollout. It's expensive to get set up as a carrier in each PUC, but we did. We scheduled over 2 years, and since then we focused on all multi-location business. Anybody 10 locations or more, that's really our sweet spot. And it's expanded from just Potline.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. And we've worked with you guys on a number of projects over the years. And obviously there's the POTS line component. You guys are heavily in the mall side of the house. You are also, again, from a DIA circuit perspective, broadband perspective, you guys have the capability of aggregating and figuring out how to make that simple for an organization.
Mm-hmm.
How many providers do you guys have on the carrier side? And obviously, so one of the things that if you've ever done things across the country or even globally, you'll find that there's a lot of mom and pop type carriers that are out there. One that always makes me laugh is Hillbilly Wireless. It's in Arkansas. They kind of corner the market in Arkansas. It makes me laugh every single time I hear it. There's another one that just came up, which is called Buckeye Broadband. Yeah. And so with those, obviously you guys are helping make it so that you don't have to, again, we want to empower leaders both on the tech side, but when we're looking at it, we're also trying to empower leaders on the procurement side, because procurement's got a tough job, especially if they have to have a multitude of contracts that they have to sign up with and help their tech leaders drive business into, or drive any type of technology into. So give me an understanding of that portion.
So it was funny, APIs were brought up in the last one. So we have APIs, we're integrated with about 140 carriers on the direct fiber side. So that means we can automate orders, repair stuff into their systems without having to pick up the phone, call anybody. But really, it's kind of countless. We're only in 2 countries, the US and Canada, so we're not global.
Yep.
But we can do anything anywhere. It's just that, there's certain areas, like you brought up a couple. Paul Bunyan Telephone is one I always think of in Minnesota. There's literally Paul Bunyan Telephone Company. They just don't do wholesale. They don't have REST APIs, so you can't integrate with their systems. So it's literally call them up, place an order. It's usually the same guy that installs every time. But it's sometimes it's like, well, he can't get out there. He's hunting. So it's the next day they'll be there. But that's real stuff, and we can get anywhere. But 140 that we're really good at.
Yeah. Well, one of the things and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, is that you guys stay in your sweet spot, and you're very, or at least once I got to the right individuals, you're very honest about what you can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you are capable to do that from a global, like when I state global, you're like, we can't do global. We can do US and Canada, that's it. And I know that you can do a few other things, but again, you stay in your sweet spot. One of the things I'd love to kind of pick your brain on is some of the innovative components. So I'll start out again, like I said, SD-WAN is dead, but it is still a necessity within the market. I do know that you guys can work with a whole host of different SD-WAN providers. How do you do that? Because again, every SD-WAN provider is different. Today we have Aruba here that has, they just acquired Juniper. They have Silver Peak in their infrastructure. Juniper has 128 technology. There's, there's different providers all throughout. How are you guys, one, able to manage over a multitude of SD-WAN providers? Because I think you have, what, about 5 or 6 in the portfolio that you,
5, about to be 4.
okay,
So it's in essence, we knew, like, when we started getting into SD-WAN in 2012, so we were pretty early in. We brought in, back then it was before anyone got bought, so Viptela wasn't Cisco SD-WAN. VeloCloud was still just VeloCloud. They hadn't bought by
VMware.
VMware and then Broadcom and everybody else. We brought in a bunch. We said none of these are the same. Like, how do you pick? And it depends on where your applications sit, what type of connectivity you have. All these other things would really drive which one would be best for a company. We settled on a handful. We knew we weren't going to be able to dictate. Like back then, AT&T just said, we're going to put VeloCloud into all our POPs. And if you want SD-WAN, it's VeloCloud. That's what it is, and that's all you get, which is all well and good, except if you use private network connectivity, it kind of takes the magic of VeloCloud away. So we did. We have 4 today. Both flavors of Cisco. So Cisco with SD-WAN, which is the old Viptela platform, in Meraki. Fortinet in Juniper. We still have a handful of VeloCloud out there. Since the last acquisition, it's just been harder to support.
Yep.
So if you can't support it well,
Yeah.
you upset more people than you help.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. We're likely going to start to retire that as far as our fully managed. But we have the ability to configure, turn up, and test pretty much anything. I know we've done projects in the past with CloudGenix before they were bought by Palo Alto. We've done Palo Alto firewall configurations. So the smart hands, the people who go out and do it, we can do the testing and turn up. If you're given a config, it's not that hard to do. We just don't have the depth, the bench depth to be able to support it 24/7.
Yeah. And I know at one point when we were doing a bunch, at one point we were doing a lot of CloudGenix in the market, and I think I was pushing you guys heavily to try to manage over the top of that. And again, at the end of the day, once it went over to Palo, it became really complicated, and
Yeah,
everything's
and we couldn't
complicated.
do it good. It wasn't. Yep.
One of the things, what was I going to say? Now I'm drawing a blank. I was going to ask you a question on. I know, so like we have HPE Aruba in here today, and I know that one of their platforms is Silver Peak, but they are in the process of acquiring Juniper from a 128 technology perspective. We have a mutual customer on the 128 side, as well as HPE Axis. So if you guys aren't familiar with, and I know that the team over at HPE will kind of broach this a little bit, but they purchase a technology called Axis Security, which is an SSE platform, effectively. I know that William talked a little bit about that SASE component and purchasing those SASE components, but one of the things I've noticed that HPE's been doing is buying best of breed. How they integrate those, they've been working with on the API side, but at the same time, they're buying these best of breed. So I know, like, you guys manage over 128 technology. I'll kind of dig your or pick your brain on that. What have you found that is interesting about that? Because again, we've went through a transition. We were partnered with 128 before they were bought by Juniper. We were partnered with Axis Security before they were bought by HPE. But as these have converged, have you noticed because you were working with 128 previously, have you noticed a simplicity in regards to some of that?
Yeah, I guess in essence, if you think about what is similar across every SD-WAN platform out there is the fact that they're all based on VPN tunnels. And really the main reason for that is every SD-WAN company, when they started, they used to be a Cisco guy, or they used to be a Juniper guy, or used to be a Palo guy. Like they came from the routing world. They left. They made a startup, hoping that one of those guys would buy them and make them super rich, right? Like that's exactly how every SD-WAN company started. 128 Technologies, which was acquired by Juniper, was rolled into their Mist platform, which was just acquired by HPE. The only one that didn't follow that model. So for the people on the East Coast, I'm from the Boston area. I remember Acme Packet Company. Acme Packet Company was one of the largest enterprise voice gateway companies, one of the best.
I don't
When
know
I,
if you guys are anybody familiar with SPCs.
yeah. So Acme Packet, you might think like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, like the anvils, Acme anvils, but they were based just north of Boston. They were bought by Oracle. So Oracle voice gateways are Acme Packet. That's what they are. They were bought in 2011 or 2012 for about $2.4 billion. So it was a huge, huge buyout. These guys had, 1 year non-competes, all the smart people there, and then they got out and they said, "What are we doing?" And they looked at the market. They said, "It's SD-WAN. Why don't we try our hand at this type of routing, not voice routing? We're going to go to network routing." So they don't use. You think about, and it's funny. So the guys at 128 are the smart people. 128 get mad at me when I simplify. But like you think about how does a SIP session work? The SIP session works, there's like a 110 packet that has a header. It starts a session, it identifies what endpoint is trusted, what's like source and destination addresses. It starts a session, allows that session to complete, and then it sends another packet, right? Like that's it. It encrypts that traffic, and it lets you run that session. In essence, that's how they did SD-WAN. So instead of creating VPN tunnels and encapsulating all of your data at all times, what they do is they put an encryption key in the header packet of that first packet. It starts a session between two trusted tenants, and then they send an end packet. So what you're doing is dynamic encryption. Why does that matter? It saves you overhead. So if you have sites with limited bandwidth, you can get probably 30 to 40% more of your bandwidth for your data as opposed to thrown away for encryption. So this is real, and especially when you start to talk to people who have huge networks, tens of thousands of locations, you're taking terabytes of overhead of just stuck traffic and eliminating it. You look at so talking about cloud, AWS, Azure, like if you're looking at express routes or direct routes, a lot of people are encrypting that data. So they'll spin up a VM of Palo or a VM of Firepower, whatever Cisco's newest firewall is, right? They do that in Azure, and they have one at their headquarters, and then they're encrypting that traffic over that direct connect. Well, you're paying for a gig and you're getting 700 megs. Or do you pay for a gig and get 950 megs? Like literally, it's the same thing. It's encrypted. It's just dynamic. So you're not encapsulating that data. And so that's the efficiencies that they had. That's why it was cool. It's why Juniper bought them. It's why we use them for our NIDs. So the reason we had a relationship with them before is NID is a network interface device. So when you deploy a DIA circuit, you need something to terminate your network. So it's just an endpoint on a network. But when you have 100,000 or more of those out there, again, there's a lot of data points. So you don't want all this private traffic or all these static VPN tunnels set up. So we were using a very, very light version of their routing platform on our NIDs. So that's what we were doing with them before they got bought. The best thing that happened to them is they got bought and then rolled into the Mist platform. So Mist, for the people who don't know, wireless access points, they were the people that bought Meraki at Cisco. They said to Cisco, "We want to innovate on this." And Cisco was like, "No, we're making money hand over fist selling this. We're not going to innovate on it." So they left and like, they'll buy us in a few years. They didn't, Juniper bought them. But in essence, what they did is they took the controller in the cloud and said, "We don't need a controller anymore." And then they put an AI engine into it, and they called it Marvis because they're all nerds and they like Jarvis from Iron Man, but they would get sued, so they called it Marvis. But it's plain language AI, so you can interact with it saying, "Hey, why is Bill having a bad team session today?" And so it allows for your tier one help desk people to do a lot more digging into it. But Juniper, that was their platform, and they rolled Session Smart Routers, that's what they call it, Session Smart Routers, their SD-WAN, into that platform. HP Aruba just bought it, so it's going to be everywhere now.
Yep.
And but that's, again, we try to find what's going to work best for our customers, and if there are different things out there, we're not scared to look.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. The one thing that I'd love for you to talk on a little bit more in depth. So obviously the 128 side of the house, or the Juniper, now HPE, again, all these acquisitions, they make my brain spin. But one of the things that it's super simple, and initially I thought it was just stupid, but once you guys walk through it and kind of gave me a little bit of value prop, again, I never indicated that I was the smartest person in the room. And so as you guys walk through this with me, I want you to talk about a little bit about Edge Boot. And from an IT ops perspective, how Edge Boot is kind of changing a little bit of, or giving a better functionality for the IT teams as well as the carrier side of the house, with one, reducing truck rolls, but also giving a lot of power to the networking side.
Yeah. So
and server side.
I did bring one out here.
You always do.
It's not my daughter's MacBook Air. It's her case though. But
it's pretty.
So I do want to start. I mentioned one of the first things is that debt free. So our CEO's had a few articles written on him. You can see he started a company. We went public. Wall Street said take a lot of debt. And he's like, why would we do that to get 4 more points of margin or 7 more points of margin, whatever it was. But you don't get to call the shots anymore. So February 2002, Network Plus, that's where I started working for him. Closed our doors, sold in bankruptcy to Broadview out of New York. That was February 2002. We got back together in June of 2002. That's when we started Granite. Our top line item goal every year is 0 debt. We've never taken on a dime of debt still. And we built a very profitable company off of POTS lines. So one of the things that we have, and I mean, you look at like the big guys we compete with, you look at like AT&T and Verizon, they're over 1 for debt to equity ratio.
Yeah.
Like they don't have money to throw at investments in developing things. And like, this is something we developed because we couldn't find something in the market to fix it.
Yeah.
So,
and just to kind of give you a little just quick. So when you look at Verizon, AT&T, Lumen, all those organizations, when you look at them on the Fortune 500, they may sit very high on the Fortune 500, and they have all of this sales revenue. But at the end of the day, because of the amount of debt that they have on the books, they're actually upside down. And if you guys understand, both buying cars or trading in cars, or your house, if you have upside down on equity, anything of that sort, like if you go and study their 10Ks, you study everything from a public funding perspective, they are extremely upside down in their revenues versus what they have on debt from a books perspective. So when you think about them doing innovation, and I'm not poo-pooing on them heavily, because we do partner with them and there's certain aspects to them that are beneficial. But when we're looking at an organization and the health of an organization, Granite, one of the things I love about them is they have no debt. So when they're driving revenues and their profitability is extremely high, they're in the positive. So even though they're not a Fortune 20 company like a Verizon or an AT&T, they have more revenue and actual money that's coming in from an equity perspective than you would see with one of the larger top 3 carriers. So go ahead. Sorry.
So basically what happened was we started to track all our resolution codes for every ticket we have out there. So over 400,000 circuits that we manage for customers. And if you look at any type of network connectivity ticket that we face, and we run this every quarter, but that's anything from latency, packet loss, CPU load, CPU memory availability to hard down, all like across the board tickets. Somewhere between 60 and 62% of our tickets in any quarter are fixed by power cycle and edge device. So now think of what our customer base is. Like I mentioned before, distributed enterprise. Now, if you're a retailer, since COVID, it's harder to hire salespeople. So you might only have one person on the sales floor at any given time. So your cable circuit goes out in there. Are you asking 100% of your sales force to leave the floor? And by the way, they're non-technical, high turnover employees that do you trust them to unplug and unplug the right thing in? So we have a lot of customers that are dispatching techs to power cycle devices. So we said, all right, we'll just go out and buy something. There's got to be something out there to do this, right? And we literally looked at everything on the market. We brought everything in and said, nothing works the way we want it to. So we developed 100 of these things by hand. They didn't look quite like this. We put 10 out each into 10 customer locations and tested it. So it's really pretty simple idea. Private LTE connectivity for out-of-band access, a brain that we teach it how to do something, and then a physical gate. So plug it in the front, plug out the back. You open the gate, it shuts power off. You close the gate, it lets power through. Really, really simple idea. We were plugging our cable modems into it. 10 sites. End of 3 months, 60% of our tickets were fixed within 3 minutes. So within 3 minutes, more than half of all the carrier issues were fixed without anybody doing anything. But what's the real beauty? Talked about APIs before. I already said we have APIs with 140 carriers. So before Comcast will roll a truck, 2 things you have to do. Verify, is there power at the site? Power cycle the modem and tell them what the lights look like. Well, we're verifying power. We're monitoring that. We've already power cycled the device. Why do I need a human to open that ticket? So for the other 4 out of 10 tickets, it wasn't fixed in 3 minutes. But in that 4th minute, the carrier has already been dispatched. So we've already opened a carrier ticket, and the human's not been involved. So what we've done is taken the human out of layer 1 troubleshooting. But 3 months go by. We meet with all those customers. They're like, yeah, that's great. But what about my switch? What about my cradle point? What about my point of sale? Like, what about these things? So we added this really high-tech DB9 connection to the side. Looks like an old SVGA cable. And all we did was added the ability to add more gates to the same brain. Really, really simple. Something else that our managed service team said is, we really have an out-of-bandwidth device out there without console access. You guys idiots. So we put a USB-A hub and an RJ45 port in the front to allow just leave a console cable plugged in. If you ever need console access, start an SSH session and get into the device. You don't have to hire a tech to go out there. I mean, what does it cost to get a tech on site next day? $200 an hour, probably a minimum of 2 hours, $100 travel charge. So $500 to get somebody there. And what do? They get there, they plug in a laptop, they put a console cable in, they start a screen share, and then they smoke cigarettes or do something while your team does everything else. And like this, just nope, in a minute, I open up that portal. 2 of our outages over those first 3 months were caused by local power issues. So like, could you guys have told us that? So we put a battery in. You can actually see there's a little shiny thing here. It's not a UPS, so it's not going to power anything here, but it keeps the brain and the out-of-band access alive for about 3 or 4 minutes, which is more than enough time for this to say, we've lost power to the outside world. Your UPS failed, whatever it is, it's giving us an alert that there's a power outage there. So we're not going to open a carrier ticket until power comes back on. We added an extra port in the back. We added this GPIO port. It's not being used yet by anyone in production. The idea was one of our customers happened to be a large pizza franchisee, and they have these big walk-in fridges. And they told us, they said, hey, we don't watch our temperature alerts because the alerts are 1 and 0, right? It's either on or off. It's either above 37 degrees or good. Like, because that's the number they care about, 37 degrees. So they said, what happens is we get 3,000 alerts a month, which means we get 0 because we just don't pay attention to any of them. Like what we really want to do, and what they saw, the beauty of this was that I can look at whatever endpoint you want. I don't have to be looking, is the internet available? I can look at the specific server address. I could put an IP address in here. It sets, so we talked before about, he was talking before about DMZs and vendor VLANs and things like that, because there are multiple devices that are going to be put into a network. Go to a restaurant today. How many times do you get a Toast tablet, right? That's a POS system that's not part of that like that's not in their network. So that's on their network, and it's somebody else's equipment, somebody else's stuff. So they set up these vendor VLANs anyway. They're there, they're in DMZs, they're somewhere. But we do that. Now I can look at, is this specific server available that sits in your data centers, your AS400s available for you to get to the things that you want to? And I can alert you that, hey, it didn't just go down for this site, but 50 of them went down at once. So maybe the data center that is supporting those 50 sites is having one issue. So now you have a device on site that's looking at things that you care about. It could be on network devices. It could have 10 APs, 3 printers, and 2 point of sale machines in here. And you're looking at the local LAN IPs on those. And so we're saying I can create an alert, and we have APIs. So I don't care if you're using, ServiceNow, Remedy, Zendesk, Jira, Avanti, Service Desk Plus. I don't care what it is. Like, we'll build an API with it. And what that means is that I can alert your team to the things you care about, because it's not all just carrier issues. It might be that I have a local device that's telling me what's going on in my network, and I want to create a ServiceNow ticket to this team. That's what we're doing for that one restaurant company. What we do is pretty simple. We watch that. If it stays above 37 degrees for 4 consecutive minutes, it sends a text, an SMS text to 3 people. Store manager, 2 assistant managers. The store is never open without one of those 3 there. The text is very simple. It says, check the fridge door, it's warm. That's the only interaction we have with the people on site ever. So your assumption is they went and checked the door at some point. If it stays above it for 10 minutes, so once it hits the 10-minute mark, it creates for them, they use ServiceNow. It creates a ServiceNow ticket to their facilities department that says, refrigerator's been above 37 degrees for 10 minutes, get facilities on site. So what we're starting to do is build a platform that allows our customers to do the things that they care about. And literally it came from us saying, I just want to be able to reboot broadband modems. Like, that's where it started. But we continue to do things like this because, I mean, we're big. We did 1.85 billion in revenue last year. Compared to the carriers, that's not that big, but that's sizable. I mean, our competitors, if you look at our peers, no one's half that size. And the fact that we have no debt, no outside investors, we're positive cash flow. It allows us to have revenue to build and support and maintain things like this.
Yeah.
I'll talk about Granite
you're
too if
good.
you want.
No, we don't have time for Granite,
so-
but no, I appreciate that because, again, yeah, when we're looking at innovation, we're looking at different technologies that organizations are doing. And again, these innovations are very simple. They're not huge in any way, shape, or form. But they're very simple, but they solve a huge problem. And that's kind of why I wanted him to talk a little bit about Edge Boot. Again, I initially thought it was dumb, but again, sometimes I'm dumb. And but as they're walking through it and what they're doing with it, it's truly changing the game within the networking space, as well as helping their customers and empowering them. So.